You felt it, even if you never put words to it. Every year, the ground under a normal life costs a little more. The rent goes up. The price of a small place of your own drifts a little further out of reach. And somewhere in the back of your mind, quiet but steady, is the feeling that the door is slowly closing. That the kind of life you once pictured, a piece of land with your name on the deed, some room to breathe, a garden, a workshop, a place nobody can raise the rent on, is turning into something other people get to have, and you just get to watch. Here's the part that'll sting a little. While you were working and paying that rent, something was going on in the background. Something almost nobody was talking about. The biggest fortunes in this country, the tech billionaires, the old ranching families, the pension funds, and the investment outfits, have been quietly buying up American land by the hundreds of thousands of acres. Not lots, not building parcels, whole counties worth of ground, changing hands mostly far away from any headline. And when regular folks finally do hear about it, they tend to hear it one of two ways. They hear panic. Buy right now, before it's all gone forever. Or they hear defeat. You'll never afford it. That game was over before you even sat down at the table. We want to slow all of that down, right here, before we go a single step further. Because this is not a reason to panic, and it is not proof that you missed your shot. It's a reason to pay attention, and to do it calmly, because the very same forces pulling all that big money in are still leaving a door open for someone like you. A real door. A real piece of ground. You just have to know where it is, and you have to walk through it like an owner, not run through it like a frightened bidder with a clock in his head. So let's do that together. No shouting, no countdown clock, no trying to scare you into your own checkbook. Just the record, the plain reasons behind it, in an honest way in that a working person can actually use. Here's the claim, and we'll say it straight so nobody has to wonder where this is headed. There is a land grab happening in America right now. You can see it in the record deals. You can see it in the prices. That part is not hype, and it's not a rumor. And in a few minutes, we'll put the actual numbers in front of you so you can decide for yourself instead of taking anyone's word for it. But here's what the panic never bothers to tell you. The regular person is not shut out of it. You are simply buying in a different tier, a quieter one that most of the noise never even mentions, because there's no drama in it, and nobody gets rich selling you fear about it. That tier is still wide open. And before this is over, you'll know exactly where it sits and how to step into it without getting burned. This is not buy now or lose forever. That's the salesman's line, and the salesman is the one person in this entire story who profits when you rush. This is Get In Smart, on your own timeline, before the wave reaches your county too. There's a world of difference between those two things, and that difference is the whole reason we're here. Now, before we go one step further, let's be clear about why you can trust a word of this. This is not a hunch, and it is not doom. It's the record and the market data, and neither one of those is trying to sell you anything. We are not realtors. We are not lawyers. Nobody here makes a dime, whether you buy an acre tomorrow or never buy a thing in your life. We're just the folks who read the records, the deeds, the county sales figures, the land value reports that get filed, whether the market's screaming hot or dead quiet. We read the boring paperwork so that you can see what's really happening instead of what somebody wants you to feel about it. The numbers you're about to hear come from the places that actually track this for a living. The Land Report, which keeps the running list of the biggest deed holders in the entire country. The county and state sales figures, the ones recorded at the courthouse, no matter which way the market's moving. And the Farm Bureau and Department of Agriculture land values, the steady, unglamorous, year-after-year numbers that don't care about anybody's headline or anybody's fear. And here's the one idea that unlocks this whole thing, so hold on to it tight. Anytime big money moves into an asset, the story gets sold to ordinary people two ways at the very same time. It gets sold as panic. Buy now, before it's gone. And it gets sold as impossibility. Don't even bother. You'll never afford it. Both of those stories are wrong. And here's the tell that gives them away. Both of them make somebody money. The panic sells you a rushed, sloppy purchase. The impossibility keeps you sitting on the sidelines, which means less competition for the people already playing. The truth sits quietly in between the two, and it leans in your favor a whole lot more than either one of them will ever let on. All right, let's look at what's actually in the record, because if we're going to sit here and talk about a land grab, we owe you the evidence first. No rumor, no vibes, no music swelling under a scary voice. Just what's filed. Start right at the very top. The single largest private landowner in America right now holds somewhere around 2.7 million acres. To put that into plain terms, that is larger than some entire states. That is not a ranch. That is a private kingdom. And that person only jumped to the top spot fairly recently, after buying 937,000 acres of ranch land in one single transaction. Not over a decade of patient shopping. One deal, one signature. It was the biggest land purchase in the whole country, and most people never heard so much as a whisper of it. Then look over at farmland, the ground that actually grows the food on your table. One tech founder is now the single largest private farmland owner in the entire United States, sitting on roughly 275,000 acres spread across 17 different states. Another one holds more than 400,000 acres out in West Texas alone. These are not vanity ranches or weekend getaways. This is tech fortune money moving very deliberately out of paper and into hard ground, drawn by scarcity, by privacy, and by a way of thinking that measures time in decades, not quarters. And here's the part that matters most to you, because it is not just the giants at the top. The everyday market turned too. Out in Texas, rural land sales volume rose more than 8% in a recent year. That was the strongest growth since 2021, and it came right after 3 straight years of steady decline. The market didn't just stop falling, it reversed hard, and prices hit fresh record highs while it did it. That's not a billionaire story. That's the regular market, waking back up, and it goes wider than any single famous name, too. The pension funds and the big investment outfits have been quietly building farmland portfolios for years now, because a slow, steady, inflation-proof return is exactly what a retirement fund is supposed to want. There's foreign money in the mix as well, buying up American cropland acre by acre, quietly enough that it took Congress a while to even start asking who owns what. None of this moves like a stampede. That's the whole point. It moves like a tide. Slow, patient, mostly silent, and by the time the average person notices the waters up around his ankles, a great deal of the good ground has already changed hands. That's why almost nobody saw it. It was never meant to be loud. So the grab is real. The evidence is filed at the courthouse and printed in the reports, and you can go check every bit of it yourself. Now, here is exactly the moment where good, sensible people get themselves heard. When everybody's talking about a land grab, folks rush. And rushing is how you end up owning a landlocked, waterless parcel you can't do a single thing with. Quick word before we keep going. Everything we keep pointing out, those are the exact catches we dig out of county records every week. And we have put every single one of them into a set of guides called Frank's Land Report Cheap Living Collection. There is one on the 50 catches hidden in cheap land listings, and that is the one for exactly what we are doing today, plus one on the 40 catches hidden in cheap houses, and a state-by-state notebook on where it is actually still cheap and what to ask. They are a few dollars each, instant download, and they are linked right in the description below. All right, back to it. So the grab is real. The next fair question is the obvious one. Why? Why is the smartest, Most patient money in the country pouring into dirt, of all things. The reasons are a lot simpler than the mystery makes them sound, and every single one of them is honest. The first one you've heard your whole life, and it happens to be true. They're not making any more of it. Land is the one asset nobody can print, mint, or manufacture. When a stock gets popular, the company can just issue more shares. When money gets tight, the government can print more dollars. But nobody in the whole history of the world has ever made one single new acre. Fixed supply, in a country that keeps adding people every year, tends to move in one direction over a long enough stretch of time. The second reason is that land has been a steady hedge against inflation. When the value of a dollar quietly erodes and your savings by a little less every year, hard assets tend to hold their footing. And land in particular has historically ridden out those storms with far smaller swings than the stock market. It doesn't spike and crash the way a hot stock does. It just sits there, being ground, holding its value while the paper stuff wobbles and lurches. For big money that thinks in decades, that steadiness is the whole appeal. They're not chasing a thrill. They're parking wealth somewhere it can't evaporate overnight. The third reason is demand that simply isn't going anywhere. Food needs ground. Energy needs ground. A growing population needs somewhere to live and work, and all of it runs straight through land. And there are brand new buyers at the table now who weren't even there a few years ago. Remote workers who left the cities during those strange few years, moved out to rural country for the space and the quiet, and then simply never went back. And newest of all, the data center and artificial intelligence build-out, quietly bidding on rural land for the enormous server farms that run the modern world. That is fresh demand, real money, competing for the same finite dirt that was already getting tighter. And there's a fourth reason, quieter than the rest, that the wealthy rarely say out loud: control. A stock certificate is a promise on a screen. A dollar is a promise from a government. But a deed to land is a thing you can stand on. You can walk its fence line, you can pass it to your children, and their children after them, and no boardroom vote or market crash can quietly delete it overnight. For people who already have everything money can buy, land is the one asset that feels genuinely permanent, and permanence, it turns out, is the most expensive thing in the world. That instinct isn't reserved for billionaires, by the way. It's the exact same instinct that has you watching this video right now. Now, here comes the honest catch, the part the panic sellers skip right past every single time, because it completely ruins their pitch. Look closely at what the rich are actually buying. Productive land, cropland, working cattle ranches, timber ground, and what folks in the business call path of development land, ground that's sitting right in the way of a growing city. They're paying $4,000, $8,000, even $12,000 an acre for it, and they'll pay it gladly. They are not out there bidding against you on a $500 desert parcel 3 counties from the nearest stoplight. It isn't on their radar. It isn't in their strategy. It wouldn't move the needle on a 2.7 million acre holding if it tried its hardest. Read that again, because it is the single most important sentence in this whole video. You're not competing with a billionaire. The picture the panic paints of you and some tech titan white-knuckling the same auction paddle over the same field was never once true. You're not in the same room. You're not even in the same building. You're not shopping in the same market. And once you really let that sink into your bones, the fear just drains right out of all this, and something a lot more useful comes in to take its place. Clear eyes, because here is your door. Precisely because the big money chases productive and development land, and precisely because most small investors chase rental houses and quick flips instead. Raw rural land ends up being the least crowded corner in all of real estate. Fewer competing buyers, more room to negotiate, more overlooked parcels that nobody is fighting over, sitting quietly in counties the wave hasn't reached yet. That's not the leftovers nobody wanted. That's the opening. That is the exact spot where a working person with a modest budget still gets a real piece of American ground at a price they can honestly pay on terms they can actually live with. And if this is the kind of straight talk you've been looking for, the honest version of this instead of the screaming version, go ahead and subscribe because we walk this same ground every single week. Now, back to your door, because knowing it exists is not the same thing as walking through it the right way. The move is not to buy fast and buy anything. Let's be painfully clear about that, because a scared buyer hears the door is open and sprints straight through it into a swamp. The move is to buy one good parcel. Just one. Checked properly, top to bottom, before migration or energy or data money ever reaches that particular county. So what does checked properly actually mean? It means a handful of plain, unglamorous questions, and every one of them can quietly ruin you if you skip it. You want legal access to the land, an actual road you have the legal right to use, not a parcel ringed on every side by other people's property with no way in and no way out. That one mistake alone has trapped more first-time buyers than any other. You want to know about the water. Whether there's a well, whether you can even legally drill one, whether the water rights come with the dirt or got sold off years ago. You want to know what you're allowed to build, because a beautiful cheap parcel you're legally forbidden from putting a home on is not a bargain, it's a trap with a nice view. You want to know what the property taxes really run, the true number, not the seller's cheerful guess. You want to know whether the thing floods, whether it perks for a septic system, and whether somebody else holds the rights to whatever's under the ground. None of that is exciting. None of it will ever trend on the internet. But that boring checklist is the entire difference between owning an asset and owning a headache you can't sell. You want to buy the piece that's quietly good in a county that's still quietly cheap. And you want to do that one time, calmly, with your eyes open, instead of 10 times in a blind panic. And while we're being straight with you, let's be straight about the trade-offs too. Because anybody who won't name the downsides is selling you something. Raw land is not a get-rich-quick asset, and we would never pretend it is. It makes no income while you hold it. A rental house at least pays you rent. A stock at least pays you a dividend. Raw ground just sits there, quietly costing you a little in property tax every year, waiting. It's also less liquid than almost anything else you can buy. When you want out of a stock, you sell it that afternoon. When you want out of a rural parcel, you might wait months or longer for the right buyer to come along. And nothing here is guaranteed. Land has trended up over the long haul, but the long haul is exactly what it asks of you. Patience is the price of admission. If you need to double your money by spring, this is the wrong asset, and would rather you hear that from us now than learn it the hard way later. Now, how do you actually find one of these quiet counties? You look just outside the path of the money, not in front of it. You find the growing city, the booming metro everyone's moving to, and then you draw a ring an hour or two out past it, into the counties the growth hasn't reached but is slowly walking toward. You look at where people are migrating, and you buy a comfortable step behind the front edge of it, not on top of it. And then you do the least glamorous thing in all of real estate. You call the county, the assessor, the clerk, the planning office. Small rural counties are full of people who will actually pick up the phone and tell you plainly what's zoned for what the taxes run, and what's really going on out there. That phone call is free, and it's worth more than any hot tip you'll ever get from a stranger online. And here's a piece of good news the panic crowd never mentions, because it doesn't fit their story. You often don't need a bank at all. A lot of rural land, especially the overlooked parcels held by folks who inherited them and just want them off the books, sells with seller financing. That means the owner carries the note themselves. You put a little down, you pay them directly over time, and no loan officer ever tells you no. It won't be the right fit for every deal, And you still check every single thing on that list before you sign a word of it. But for a working person who was told the bank would never look at them twice, that quiet little door has put more names on more deeds than almost anything else in this business. That's the whole strategy. It is not thrilling. It will never go viral. But it is exactly how ordinary, patient people have quietly ended up owning ground for generations, while the loud money and the louder sellers made all the noise out front and paid all the premiums. Now, one more thing before we get to the part almost nobody says out loud. If you're not just looking at land, but weighing a cheap house, or maybe a whole new state to plant yourself in, we put everything into one set called the Complete Cheap Living Field Edition. All 3 guides, the 50 land catches, the 40 catches hidden in cheap houses, and the state-by-state notebook on where living is genuinely still cheap and what the property taxes really run in each place. And in the bundle, the due diligence worksheet pack comes free. The property comparison sheet, the county office call log, the site visit inspection sheet, and the budget calculator. All printable, all fill in the blank, all built to sit on your dashboard while you drive the property. It's about $45 of guides for $29.99. The link's in the description, and we'll tell you exactly what we always tell you. One bad deal costs more than the whole collection ever could. Now, here's who's really profiting from all of this. Because here's the insider truth, the part that gets left out of every single panic video on the internet. The biggest money in a land grab isn't only made by the people buying the land. A whole lot of it gets made by the people selling you the panic about it. Think about how that machine actually works. The flippers and the hype channels take a real, honest fact. That good ground is genuinely getting scarcer, and they twist it into a ticking countdown clock. Because a scared buyer is a profitable buyer. A scared buyer skips the paperwork. A scared buyer doesn't call the county office. A scared buyer overpays for whatever dirt is cheapest, closest, and available today, and only gets around to asking the hard questions long after the money's already gone and the ink is already dry. Fear is the most reliable sales tool ever invented, and dirt is the perfect thing to sell with it because it feels permanent and it feels like it's slipping through your fingers all at once. You've seen the machine in action, even if you didn't clock it at the time. The slick land auction sites with the ticking timers, the $99 down, low monthly payment offers on some sun-baked parcel out in the middle of nowhere. They dress it up as your one shot at the American dream. And they count on you never once calling that county to ask the boring questions. Because if you did call, you'd find out the parcel has no legal road access, or no water, or that you can't build a thing on it, and the whole spell would break right there on the phone. The urgency is the product. The dirt is almost an afterthought. Slow down long enough to make 3 phone calls, and most of those deals fall apart on their own, which is exactly why they're built to never let you slow down. Now, let's be fair here, because this is the exact spot where it would be easy to tip over into a villain story, and we're not going to do that to you. Nobody has to be evil for this to cost you money. Most of the time it's just drift. A plain, useful truth, they're not making any more of it, slowly got bent from a fact you ought to understand into a pitch designed to make you move before you think. And half the people out there repeating it don't even realize anymore which one of the two they're doing. So let's hold 2 things in our hands at once, because both of them are true. The demand is real. We just showed you the record. And the opportunity is real too, sitting out in those quiet counties right now, waiting. But the danger in all of this was never that you'd miss out. The danger was always that you'd rush in. Missing out costs you a maybe. Rushing in costs you real money on a real parcel that you really can't undo once your name is on it. And here's the dignity in it, because this, underneath everything, is what the whole thing has really been about. A working person, somebody who's been priced out of so much for so long, told the door was closed on the house, closed on the comfortable retirement, closed on the whole dream. that person can still own a real piece of this country. That's not a slogan, and it's not a pep talk. It is simply true, and the record backs it up. But it only stays true for the person who moves like an owner who did his homework and not like a bidder who panicked at the sound of a clock. Calm isn't slow. Calm is shrewd. Priced out doesn't mean shut out, and buying your piece at 55 or 65 isn't buying it too late. It's buying it for the life that's still in front of you, on your own terms, with your own name on the deed, and nobody able to take it back. So let us ask you something, and we'd honestly like to know the answer. Are you seeing land prices move where you live, or is it still quiet in the areas you've been looking at? Drop the county or the region down in the comments below, because the honest picture of this country's ground gets built out of exactly those on-the-ground reports from real people in real places. And there are other folks watching right now who are trying to read the very same map you are. And if you want to keep going, the next thing worth looking at is the one that surprises people the most. The forgotten corners of America where land is still almost free. The counties the wave hasn't touched at all yet, where the numbers look like they wandered in from another decade. That's where this quiet strategy really comes alive. And we'll walk it the very same way we walked this one, calmly, patiently, with the record open on the table where you can see it. Because the land grab is real. We're never going to sit here and pretend it isn't. But the winners out of all of this won't be the ones who rushed. They'll be the ones who saw it coming, took their time, checked the paperwork twice, made the phone calls nobody else bothered to make, and bought the right piece in the right county for the right reasons. Long before everybody else finally noticed there was anything to notice at all. The dream of owning a piece of this country was never really about beating the billionaires. It was about having a patch of ground that's yours, that answers to you, that nobody can raise the rent on or take away. That door is still open. It always was. Just walk through it slow and walk through it smart. Be one of those.